Well, hello everybody out there in YouTube and Facebook land. This is, if you don't know, my name's William Green. I'm doing kind of a show on the news I've found. Part of it's military related, part of it's civilian related. You know, it's all the kind of political and military chaos going on right now. So I hope everybody out there has survived, the ghouls and goblins that were out, and we're ready to get down to our election here in the United States. And if you're not here in the United States, you may be getting ready for Veterans Day on the 11th. If you're in great old England or Australia, Canada, and if you're in one of these war zones, we feel terrible for what's going on around you. Yeah, we hope for the best. So, here we are on November 1st. Hurricane Helene has long since passed us here in the United States. I mean, as far as the news cycle, we're not even hearing about it anymore. But we've got pilots that are still involved in helping people in those areas where the roads and infrastructure was washed away. And what they're saying is when they went in, they didn't know what they didn't know, right? And they're afraid if they go home, mom and pop, might not get their medicine and have a bad outcome. They're saying they need helicopters from the government right now because they're expending all the fuel and machinery that they've been able to run. And one of the aid workers there, actually it was a pilot, went to put some victims in a hotel near the disaster area, but not in the disaster area. The security came out and said they couldn't give them a room in that area because that was all taken up by FEMA for government workers, and they've not had a good working relationship, if you want to say that, with FEMA. They're saying FEMA has had mission creep, and the big tragedies that are happening within the United States to citizens are being ignored to meet the humanitarian needs of non-citizens at the border, which I tend to agree with because they've come to Congress saying that they don't have enough money. But that's kind of the bad news. The good news is we now know that FEMA is kind of a government disaster itself, with shifting priorities and, even possible political agendas, because these were kind of red areas that were struck, and liberals are, for the most part, in control of the government right now. The great news is good Americans have stepped up to fill the void, but it's time for the government to show up as well. So yeah, the mission creep is a real problem. Now, according to FEMA, and this this as a discussion from middle management, all right? They're saying that their main effort now is to be resilient and ready. And when they mean resilient and ready, they mean to meet the needs of people that are less likely to get services like LGBTQIA+. And so they're looking at resilience and readiness from within the values of diversity, inclusion, and the rest. So middle management at FEMA is kind of distracted. And the people in North Carolina, I guess is that right, Ellie, North Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
Are kind of upset because they haven't landed hard and began helping out like they did in Katrina, for instance. So, yeah, it took a while for the government to show up in Katrina. It took days, but it didn't take, weeks and months. So, yeah, we've got some people kind of upset in North Carolina, and for good reason. Great. Let me flip my page. I got a different kind of notebook now. It's a clipboard, Ellie, so I can write on it. Anyway, the British Army is thinking about turning their backs on the Prime Minister when the celebration for the end of World War I and Veterans Day comes along. Because they're concerned that even though there's been a little more funds set aside by the government for veterans and national readiness, they're afraid it's not going to go to the right places. And they feel like their country's in decline, and the Prime Minister needs to step up and get things improving. All right. This is from the political zone. Of course, this is all political, whether it's here in the United States or England, for that matter, that we've talked about. Kamala has gone after is RFK Jr., saying that he is the last person who should be setting health policy here in the United States. So if he gets to a place where he can help with health policy in the United States, Kamala's not too excited about it. And I thought about that for a while. I don't think she's upset about him actually changing things. I think she's upset that he will voice things to Congress that will change the direction of some laws. And that's going to impact some political structures within healthcare. So it's not like RFK Jr. is going to have the capacity to change policy within one of these agencies. It's that he will bring to the attention of Congress what some of these changes should and ought to be. So I can see Kamala's point because, they've taken a long time setting up their policy, and I can see RFK's point. So that's politics. Moving on.
Well, wait a minute, William. I got something that came in about an hour ago.
Okay.
It's like big news. It's the Biden administration slapped with a lawsuit over documents on taxpayers' money benefiting illegal migrants. Um, the documents has shown that of non-governmental organizations that received lots of federal funding from the Department of Health and Human Services and the Biden administration. And that was for the years 23 and 24 to assist with housing, education, medical, or legal and other services. And this is the right to be able to be slapped with a lawsuit, falsifying documents. So that was big news that just came out. So go ahead. I'll let you go. Keep going.
I think that some of these non-governmental organizations, these public-private partnerships, have to
Soros.
document where the dollars that have been given to them by the government go.
Yeah, I bet it's a lot of Soros.
So it's the GAO, General Accounting Office, there in Congress. And these public-private partnerships are terrible in that they divert government funds away from their intended needs and direct them more towards policy, because most of these private partnerships are policy driven, right? Not care driven. So when you funnel money into them, it's not going directly necessarily to the intended need that the government has specified. It gets diverted to a degree on the basis of political or policy differences with the government. So we have to get away from these public-private partnerships. Now, we have to have some, all right? Boeing is a public-private partnership. NASA is a public-private partnership with SpaceX. These are partnerships that act within engineering and the science realm. They're not necessarily politically driven. They're monetary and research driven. So there is a caveat there. But if it's just, some of these private folks that get government money, like churches or transportation companies or airlines or these sort of things, these funds might not be used wisely. And we need to, as a government, delineate where our funds are safe to be delivered and where our funds are not safe to be delivered. We have to come up with a different way of distributing those assets to meet the needs of our citizens. Okay, enough with that. So, yeah, I think RFK Jr. is going to be a voice in Congress, and he may not be a voice that's completely welcome. Okay. Biden has been railing against cuts to union pensions, and he's been saying it should never happen. I kind of tend to agree with that, but there's a caveat to that as well. If the company's not profitable, if the investments that the retirement funds have been poorly invested and lost money, they have to do cuts. But if there is good management in a great functioning government and a robust economy, he's right, that it should never happen. Okay. ALJ has filed a petition to the 11th Circuit Court to have Jack Smith removed from his unconstitutional post. You know, without a burden on the government, meaning that all U.S. attorneys have to be confirmed by Congress, and they have to stay within their judicial boundaries. Okay, and they're overseen by not just Congress, but also the Supreme Court. Supreme Court and Congress work together to manage, if you will, these U.S. attorneys. And the U.S. attorneys have to stay within their judicial boundaries. So we know that there's at least 11 circuit courts because they filed this on the 11th Circuit Court. The executive branch, their job is enforcement and investigation. What went wrong? Should somebody be arrested? What went wrong? Do we need to go to Congress to go to war? What went wrong? How can we deal with the problem we're seeing with diplomacy rather than with kinetic energy? That's the province of the executive, intelligence agencies, investigative agencies. But the courts are different. They're under the judicial branch, and they're managed by the judicial branch. And all U.S. courts are that way, federal courts. Now, the state courts mirror a lot of what goes on in our federal system.
William, real quick, because we're coming so much on the election, and a lot of your local elections have judges, and your judges will not tell you if they're Democrat or Republican. I don't know if anybody notices that. You have to really call and ask them, because when you put these judges in place and then they get promoted, they go to a higher and higher court. So just be careful. If you don't want, that's where we got a bunch of Democrat judges in the systems for all the states, is people just didn't understand that, they said, oh, they did a good job last time, maybe this time. So if you want to make sure you don't get the wrong judges in, call and ask them what political party they are.
So prosecuting attorneys, U.S. attorneys, are there to press the case to the best of their ability, brought to them by, like, the FBI, okay? And they're supposed to bring these infractions into the court, right? Arraign whoever's been arrested, set up a trial time or a hearing time to prepare for trial, and the judges are just supposed to be a referee, okay? They're only there to call balls and strikes. If they're doing something more than that, they're out of the judicial realm. Mm-hmm. They are there to just balls and strikes based on precedent and the direction of the Supreme Court, based on the Constitution. That's their boundaries. If anytime they step out of those boundaries, you should know about it. And if it becomes a political issue on either side, because remember, once a court is politicized, at least half the population, right, on one side or the other, like we're divided right now, is not going to trust that court's decisions. Judges need to stay out of the political realm. And that's why they don't actually say what their political affiliation is privately. They're only there to call balls and strikes. Mm-hmm. And judges in the federal court and prosecutors have to stay within their judicial boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, he had unlimited boundaries all over the country. He had access to every court in the nation, state and federal. And he was not confirmed by Congress. Okay, moving on. Transcript tinkering. And swing state shenanigans, we'll say, are well underway. So the president came out in a speech and said, quote, Trump supporters are garbage. Now he could have said Trump supporters ideology is garbage. Right? But he didn't. And we also know that he's not in complete control of his faculties anymore. But the stenographers at the White House have had political pressure put on them to modify what the president said, directly on camera, put a comma in there that it wasn't about the people, you know what I'm saying? And the stenographers are saying that's not what stenographers do. They just write down what is said, period. Good, bad, up, down. They don't choose. They hear the information, they record the information, period. And so there's been a big kind of blow up. Some of these stenographers have come forward, I guess, and are causing a bit of a stir, even in the mainstream media.
Yeah, the ones that came forward, they are an independent, like stenographers that don't. They don't work with the federal government, or they don't work with White House. They're a private entity. The girl on Fox and Friends First in the morning, I believe, she's used to work at one of those or work for them. And she says, so they're independent. And when they seen this happen, they got a hold of them and said that they basically couldn't do that, after the. So go ahead.
Typically are a function of the courts. So they've probably been placed there by the courts and are supported by the courts. So the president, so that people get the full information,
accurate
about
account.
What the president does. I would suspect that. I don't know for sure, but where do you find the most stenographers? It looks that way to me. I might be wrong. If I got it wrong, somebody out there in YouTube land or Facebook land, please give me a comment, and I'll go do some more research if it's important to you. Okay. Now, what I'm going to say is not about warfare here. I want to say that in the beginning. Okay? So, conflation of what somebody else said by another team can be like, I'm putting like in quotes, information warfare. except without the casualties, right? It's more like information warfare in, say, professional wrestling. You say what you're going to say as long as you don't say that, the venue's on fire, and afterwards everybody goes home happy, wakes up the next day as usual, goes about their daily work as usual, and can move on. We have to remember this conflation. If we don't put it in context, it can lead to violence. So I've said what I'm going to say about that. Now, there are folks in this political contest we're in. This is an inflection point in history. This time we're at started at the end of World War II, for the most part, went one way, and then started changing directions in about 1988, let's say. And it's come half swing, now to the point where the folks that have gone through business as usual since World War II are now looking at change within their workspace, and they may be fearful that they may not be able to adapt fast enough to maintain their standard of living. Everybody feels that, right? So that doesn't make you evil. But if you work for the government, you kind of have to take it as it comes. And you have to be respectful when it goes, because government has needs beyond just a workforce and a product, a sales force. Okay, I said my piece. Now, we've had a conflation. In the Main Street media, the conflation is that Trump said that Miss Liz Cheney should be, put in front of the gun, and, well,
wow.
That's what they're saying, is that, let's get rid of Cheney altogether. That's not what was said. That was completely out of context.
Wow.
Okay? What Trump was saying is Liz Cheney is a war hawk, and that if she would have been sent to the front line of a war zone and had to battle what she was recommending, she wouldn't be nearly as excited about going to war, having the United States go to war.
That's true.
Now, was Trump not articulate enough that way? Well, he's speaking off the cuff, right? In a campaign time, it was obvious what he was saying. Okay? But this is being used as a wedge issue in this political contest, right? That's what we do here in the United States. We are a people that have a government that acts in behalf of all the citizens of the United States. Each one of us, 320 million, 360 million of us, each have that 360 millionth sovereignty to give the government the power to act in their behalf. Now, it may not quite work that way because there's a lot of other people that are doing the same thing. So we'll likely get some of what we want, but it's not likely we'll get all of what we want. Political contests are a public negotiation with statistics produced by counting of votes. And so that's a good thing. Everybody, it's just like pro wrestling, right? Everybody gets to go home afterwards. Nobody, goes off to the afterlife here. That's the idea behind our vote, is to avoid war. Now, we've been pretty successful here in the United States. I don't know if people realize we are the longest living democracy in the history of the world. Okay, well, Democratic Republic. Voters, government for, by, and of the people, for the greatest good of the whole of the nation. And whoever we put into office is there for all of us, not for any one of us or any subgroup. They are there to lead for all the nation. So it's what makes us as successful as we've been historically, not just politically, but economically and religiously and militarily. So it's a good thing. These contests are great, but these inflection points suck. Right, Ellie?
Yeah.
Because we're being pushed and pulled in every direction. We have to look at things in context. So when you hear something from the mainstream media, even from here on the internet, verify the sources, listen to it yourself, watch it, then make a decision. Don't trust somebody else to do that work for you. You just can't do it in an inflection point. You can kind of get away with that when you have a slackwater time politically, like 10 years after World War II. You just really, it was just you're either conservative, meaning you didn't want the government to change beyond the Constitution very quickly, so it wasn't difficult to adapt, and you had some liberals that said, yeah, but we want to go a little faster than, watching concrete dry. That's a different world. That's the world our parents grew up in. That's not the world we're in right now. So we've got a lot of people that are kind of yelling fire, and they shouldn't be doing it. Now, as far as Miss Cheney goes, and the Cheney family, they come from Wyoming. All right. Dick Cheney, her father, made his way to Congress after he had been working in the oil fields for a while and figured out, just like I figured out, and actually kind of the same time, it sucked. It was really cold. It was really dirty. We made good money, but dang, did we have to be there? So he decided he was going to run for Congress. I decided I was going to go in the military. It was a big pay cut for me, but, my after work hours were much better. So, Dick grew up playing sports. He's a great football player for his high school. A natural born leader, right? Then he went to work in the oil fields, and I'm sure he rose up pretty quickly. But even if you're over a group on a derrick or maintaining a pipeline or whatever, you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere if you're middle management. You're making sure all the parts are working all the way down the line, and it can be pretty miserable. We here in Washington, we have what are called ditch riders. Well, actually, they're canal riders. They're people that drive along the canal where the water comes through. Now, it's not a concrete canal, all right? It's a wooden berm canal. And it goes all the way from Banks Lake up by Grand Coulee Dam, all the way down here into Grant County in the center of the state. And they have to make sure that that canal doesn't empty out into people's homes or wipe out people's farms. And they have people that have to ride and make sure the integrity of that canal is constantly in check. I mean, they have to go through there like every day or so. That's kind of what it's like being in the oil fields. It kind of sucks. Now, being a war hawk and not having anybody that you're connected to personally, not serving, may leave you, what's the word? Kind of unaware of the true sacrifice that's going on based on policy. And so I think that's what's going on with Liz Cheney. I think that's what's going on with the Main Street media trying to get their candidate across the finish line. I get that they're trying to get their candidate across the finish line. That's okay. But when you do this other thing, that's a conflation to the point of screaming fire in a crowded theater. All right. I guess I've said enough on that one. Now, what I've learned about the military worldwide. I think it was earlier this year, right? There was an F-35B Lightning. It's our new stealth fighter. It's single engine. This is the variant that does the vertical landing, and it can take off vertically if necessary. And we had a crash of one, and it flew quite a ways without a pilot. And it was a little concerning to the public. Well, the investigation's come out now. Information has come out through channels, to newspapers, but hasn't been, I think, delivered through public affairs offices yet. This is just information that's leaking through the system, through pilots who know pilots, if you will. What happened was these were new airplanes, and the pilot of this airplane had 3,000 hours in an F-18. But his job was to oversee the other pilots in his squadron. It's a Marine squadron. I don't know what they call it exactly. I'm Air Force. We're just going to call it a squadron because that's what it is to me. And he didn't get much time to be in the air. The commander of the squadron flies as well. They need to stay up on their type rating. But because they had very new aircraft, and he was trying to keep track of what all of his pilots were doing, ensuring that this transition from the F-18 to the F-35 was going like it should. Being in charge of a squadron in transition, it's like if you work at, let's say you work at Ford factory building cars, and management comes down to you and says, okay, we're going to take 3 of you here off the floor, and we're going to give you keys to a building across town. Okay, so we've got a building over there across town. We need you to go over there and get ready for a group of people we're sending to you. And oh, by the way, you need to decide what you're going to build, how you're going to build it, and all the processes and accounting, and set that whole thing up. It's crazy. going to a new type aircraft. None of them are the same. So, like back in the old days, you used to fly by what they called the six-pack. You had six gauges. And based on those 6 gauges, you made your best judgment. And based on air traffic control, could help you above 10,000 feet. But when you drop below 10,000 feet and had to go land at an airport or something like that, until you got down to 2,000 feet and close to that airport, you were on your own between 10,000 and 2,000 feet AGL. That's above ground level. So pilots got used to using the six-pack, and that was primarily what was going on in early Vietnam. Okay, they were just starting to get the heads-up displays, but they were projector heads-up displays. They weren't digital heads-up displays, and they were based on mechanical computers and tube computers and diodes and things that were constantly failing because they were just brand new. The evolution of the aircraft was going from Wright brothers in 1920 to jet fighters in 1960. It was crazy. So the six-pack is what they used. Then, you know, after the F-18 or F-15, F-14, whatnot, they used what was called the heads-up display. That was their primary display. The backup was the six-pack, and then they had all these other things for communications, choosing their weapons. They had multifunction displays for weapons targeting. It was endless, and it was all right in the cockpit, right in your face. So you would have to take your eyes, refocus, okay, down on your instruments, then look out, just like you were looking out across the field to pick up the heads-up displays information. So you had to bounce back and forth. That's what this pilot had been trained on for 3,000 hours. When he got in the F-35, they don't have a heads-up display. They've got a flat panel with touch, like a tablet. You touch it for whatever you want it, drag, drop. You know, you got the idea. But your primary instruments aren't there. Your primary instruments are on the inside of the visor of your helmet. You don't look out with your eyes and focus away from the aircraft, because you can see straight through the bottom of your aircraft. You're looking through cameras all over your aircraft. So this pilot only had, it was like 16 hours in the F-35. They got into bad weather in that 8,000 foot zone. And this pilot got disoriented. He went through everything he could figure out to solve the problem, but you only have so much airspeed, altitude, and time. And when you're in a jet, it's not like an airplane. It's really compressed. You have to make decisions immediately. He got disoriented, thought the plane was in failure, and he punched out. Now, in the last 2 months before the accident, he only had like 6.5 total hours in the airplane. You know, on good days. Not in fog, you couldn't see anything around you, with the wind blowing, tossing you around. So, that happened. This is some of the teething things you go through when you set up a new type of aircraft in a squadron. And they looked through all the indications. You know, they got crash retrieval of the black boxes, and they looked at all the parameters and the telemetry and all the good information, and they decided, you know what, if we were in that spot, we'd probably done the exact same thing. Given all these factors. So he wasn't brought up on discipline. He just went back to his business as the commander, okay, of this squadron. Now, where we get this information is from a squadron completely across the United States. So it's not over there in Carolina, it's in Yuma, Arizona. And he's been sent over there to Yuma, Arizona to be a commander of something, of some group. I don't have all the information. We're going to have more information as we go, okay?
William, the time.
Pardon?
The time, watch it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we'll just finish this little story on the F-35, and I'll save the other good stuff for later. But he got there. He was there 2 months. There was going to be no problem, but there were pressures that came down through Congress or through the Joint Chiefs of Staff someplace, and the commandant told him, we're going to have to relieve you of your command here, not because you've done anything wrong, but just for perception's sake. And they don't want, the public thinking that the government can just, trash a multi-million-dollar aircraft and nobody's going to get punished for it, or nothing's going to happen over it. Everything's going to continue the same way. So the commandant relieved him, gave him some different orders. He's not being punished. He hasn't lost his billet, any of that stuff. And now he's going to lead in another area. So that's why this information's come out. That's what brought it to the attention of the newspapers in the Yuma, Arizona area, and that's why we ended up with it. So, yeah, that's what happened to our F-35 that flew on its own for a while. It's got really good electronics and flight control systems, and it just did its job as long as it could until, So that's what I got for today, Ellie. We'll get to the 12,000 in North Korea and Hamas, Ukraine, defense operations. We'll just save that for Monday. So that's kind of my report tonight. I hope everybody kind of enjoyed it. I did quite a bit of research trying to understand this F-35B thing, because when it went down, we were all speculating how come the airplane didn't have a pilot. And okay, so there's that. I hope everybody has a good evening, and I guess Ellie's gonna be having trivia here in a minute, and I better get over to my tablet so that Susan can beat me. But it's a fun time, and everybody will enjoy it, even Susan beating me. Okay, thanks everybody. We hope you have a good weekend. Make sure you voted. No matter what your vote is, it's respectable. If you're a citizen and you vote, you have to have the respect of the American people, so it's respectable. Let's not get divided over that 360 millionth part of the national sovereignty. It's not worth losing your friendships, your families, whatnot over it. This is a contest that will always go on in a democratic republic, and this is just a really tough time. People are polarized, but after the election, the country's still going to move forward. It's still going to maintain itself. It may change its course slightly, but we will recognize it. So Have a good evening. Hope you enjoy trivia. I'll see you Monday, maybe with Ellie. Yeah. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. You can even write bad things about what I said. It's okay. I'm probably tough enough to take it a little bit. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.